Use case 24. Whenever create n locations field is updated, accordingly add or remove locations record under the contact record. So here the parent is going to be the contact object and the child is going to be the locations object. And you would have a field that's called create n locations, where you would be defining a number there, and as soon as you update the field, accordingly, if you have made an increase to the number, you would be adding some more records of the child, and if you decrease the number, you would be deleting some records of the child. Okay, so that's our use case. Where do you want to write it? You want to write it on the contact object. That's correct. What should be the event? Should it be insert, update, delete? It should be the update event, right? It should also be the insert event. Why? Because what if you start with creating the contact record and you immediately you set the value on this field. So we'll be basically handling two different events in a single use case, insert and update. Okay, and this would be after insert and after update. Why? Because once the record has been updated is when we want to do this activity. This is a related record stuff that we are doing, right? So it would be after insert, after update. Okay. What context variables are available? After insert you have trigger.new, after update also you have trigger.new. Will you need the old map? You will need it for the after update context. Okay, so we'll see how do we use all of this together to complete this use case. This will be an interesting one. Let's try to solve it together. So first let me go to let me take a look if I have a location object created or not. There is a location object, right? I want to go ahead and maybe let's see what are the fields here. Is this associated to the contact object? No. So let me do something. I'll create a new custom object for my use case. I'll not modify the existing object. I'll go ahead and create a new custom object. I'll associate it with the contact object. Okay. So I've associated both the objects. Let's go to contact and create that field. So I'll go to contacts, I'll go to fields, and I'll create a new custom field. So the data model is ready. If I now go to, let's say if I go to the contact record, let's open a contact record. And if I open a contact, let's say address copycat, so I should see the create n locations field here, right? This is the field. Okay, and if I go to the related section, I should see the locations tab, this right here. Okay, so as soon as we update this record and we add some value here, we'll basically be seeing those many related records created under the locations object. Okay, and if we go ahead and create a new contact record and we fill in this particular value, create n locations, this right here, immediately those related records should also be created. This is our entire use case. Okay, let's go ahead and solve it. So I'll open the contact trigger. What are our events? After insert and after update. So they are already mentioned here. What about insert? It is here. After insert, right? What I'll do is I'll create one more handler method. I'll say create n locations. Okay, this is my after insert method. So this will take the parameter trigger.new. Okay, and what about the after update? After update is here. So I'll say contact trigger handler dot create n locations. Okay, I'll basically be using the same method from two different contexts, right? So I'll just pass trigger.new here. We talked about using the old variable when it comes into the picture. That time we'll see how to figure it out. Okay, I'll just keep the trigger.new because it is available in both places, and I'll go to the trigger handler and I'll create this method. So I'll just say create n locations, new records, save. Trigger handler should save fine. The trigger should also save fine. Okay, framework is ready. Let's go to the create n locations method. So what do we want to do here? We want to basically check for each contact con in new records. I want to find what is that value, right? Con dot create n locations, this value. I want to find this value, and whatever has been mentioned, I want to basically I want to basically create those many location records, correct? That is my ask. So what I can do is I can create a con map and I can put con.id comma con.create and locations. I can create a map, right? Or I can just store. I cannot store this in a list. Why? Because I will not know which contact record has how many locations to be created or updated. That's the first thing, right? That's why I'll need a map. But before creating a map, how do I segregate whether the record is being inserted right now or it is being updated? Because if record is being inserted, right, in that case I just want to create records, create location records. Why? Because they have not modified anything, they've just given a value to it. Okay, provided the value is not null, only then I want to create whatever number is provided. I want to create those many records, right? And if else if a record is being updated, right, what do I want to do? I want to check if the new number is more than the previous number. What will this give me? Let's say the previous value was 3 and the new value is 5 on that field. Okay, does that mean you have to create 2 new records? Yes, so you'll create 2 new records of the location object. What if the previous value was 5 and the new value is 3? What does that mean? That means your 2 records, existing records, have to be deleted. This would be our logic. Okay, but first of all we need to find out how do we segregate the insert and the update operation. So can I do something here? Can I say if trigger dot is insert? Can I do this? Let's see. Let's see if this variable saves up here. What are the problems that we are facing here? Okay, this might be another problem. Let's get rid of this because that's just text, and I'll say if else if trigger dot is update, and I'll say save. Let's see if it saves up fine or not. This saved up fine. Okay, so I can run the insert context here and I can run my update context here using the same method because I'm using the same method. Okay, let's say save. Okay, so first let's do the insert scenario. So insert scenario, I'll simply fetch this particular value. What was my value? Create end locations. This create end locations, right? So I'll just simply iterate over this particular variable. That should work. So I'll say for integer I equals 0, I less than con dot create end locations I plus plus. Did I create this without the a? Let me check the field. I might have made a typo. If I take a look at the details, yeah, I missed the a here. Okay, so that's okay. Try to rectify it in when you are trying it, because I don't like spelling mistakes, and this is not a good practice to keep. Okay, so I'll just leave it for this use case because we have a long way to go. So I'll just iterate over here and I'll say locations. I'll create the instance of my location object. Okay, let's say save. Saved up fine, and I'll add this new location in a list. Okay, I'll say locations to create. In case of an insert, you will always be creating the location record. I hope you agree with that, right? And I'll simply put a name here, name equals, I'll say location plus I, whatever is the current integer variable will be stamped here. Okay, so if the number is 3 here, this will run for 3 times, and this will basically be name equal to location 0, location 1, location 2. Okay, I'll just define this particular list because it has not been defined yet. So I'll just go outside here. It's a list of location equals new list. And I'll just define this list. Save. There should not be any more errors. Cool. Right? And if I just take this out and I go outside this entire for loop, I can simply say if this list is not empty, insert locations to create. Save. So our insert scenario is very simple, and we have just done it. Okay, there's one thing missing. You have not, I mean I have not, but basically we have not associated this location with the contact. The parent-child relationship has not been developed. So I'll simply say contact equals con.id. That is how we'll be associating it, right? I hope this is the correct field API name. I named it contact, so the API name should be contact __ c. Cool. So this is the parent field. Let's go ahead and test it out. I'll just check the insert scenario. So I'll simply create a new contact and I'll say Himanshu Maheshwari. Let's take a look at, I think that's all right. Where is that field? This field right here. I'll say 3. Okay, let's say save. Okay, there's some error. It says duplicate found. So there might be some issue with the with some other use case. So let me just go ahead and put some additional attributes here so that it is unique and it is not duplicate. Let's say save. That was some other use case. Okay, that was firing. So see, the contact is created, but we are interested in seeing, are the locations created? Yes, they are created. 3 location records have been created with that integer attribute. So you see, and they are here because they have been associated with this particular contact. Good. So that was the insert scenario. That's working absolutely fine. Now we need to take a look at the update scenario. Okay. Now understand here, update scenario, how will this work? Try to think it through before implementing it. Okay. So basically in an update scenario, what you would be doing is you would be basically coming to this contact and you'll be modifying this particular value. Now you can either basically increase this value or decrease this value. And based on that, you can take a decision. So if previous value is less than, not current, I'll say new value. What do? You insert the new records, correct? And if previous value is more than the current new value, you delete those many records. What do I mean by those many records? You delete the difference basically. That's what you do, correct? So let's try to implement this. So this is if trigger dot is update. This will only run for the update context. So I'll just copy this loop here. Oh, this loop is already outside, so we are good. I'll just use this context variable. So I'll say if. Now how do I compare the previous value and the new value? I'll need the old variable. It might be the old map or the old record, but we don't have it here on my method. How do I fetch it? I would have to provide trigger dot old here, correct? Now when I do that, let's see what happens if I say save. Trigger dot old map is set here, but it says method does not exist. Why? Because I have not added it here. Let me add it here. I'll say id comma contact old record map. Save. If I save it here, this will save up fine. But if I go back and try to save this here and say save, so you see, it's still saying there's an error. So it's create n locations trigger dot new trigger dot old map, and here I have new records versus map of id comma contact. What's the problem? The problem is this method right here is also the same, but the parameters have not been provided here. And now the problem is this is an insert scenario. How do you provide an old value? We don't have it. So in that case, we simply provide null, because this will not hold any value. We can simply provide the second parameter as null. Okay, I'll go back and try to save this one more time. I'll just say old record, I'll just say old map and say save. Okay, and I'll just try to get rid of this line once so that this gets saved successfully without any issues. This is saved, and I'll go back to my trigger and try to save it again. This should also save up fine. Okay, so lesson from this small 1-minute discussion is basically, if you want to use the same method for different contexts, you can pass null attributes if those values are not present. Or else what will happen if you pass the trigger dot old map here and you try to parse it here, it will somewhat fail if in case you are in that context. I put these checks here, but sometimes you might not be able to put these checks. Okay, the use case might be a bit complex. So in that case, you should always ensure that either you put a null check or you simply pass null and you avoid any issues. Okay, so I'm using the same method, and this method is basically taking 2 parameters now, and now this should be easy for me to compare old and new values. So I'll simply say if old map dot get con dot id dot create. I'll just copy it from here, create n locations. What is the first scenario? If previous value is less than new value. New value is basically con dot create n locations. That's my first scenario. And my second scenario is I can simply put it on an else condition. Okay, what if the value has not changed? I don't need to do anything, right? So I have to put this here. I have to say else if and I simply say I take this up and I say greater than, because see, if the value is the same, that means the value has not changed, and the value has not changed, that means the number of locations should stay the same. Correct? So I'll simply say less than and greater than. These are the two clauses I'll have to check. Okay. What other check I can put on top? I can simply put this also. If old map dot value is not equal to the new value, which means there is a change. If I say this line right here, I say not equal to, which means that there has been made a change on this particular field itself as part of this update. This can be guaranteed if condition executes and gets inside, right? And then we can just cover these two scenarios. That's a good check to put. Okay, now let's solve both of these one by one. So if old map dot get create location is less than this, which means what do we do? If the previous value is less, that means we create more records. How many more records do we create? We create the difference. So integer new records to create equals con dot create n locations minus the whatever was the previous value, right? I'll give you an example. If the old value was 3 and the new value is 5, so we'll have to create how many records? 2 records. How can I say that? I can say 5 minus 3 would be true, 2. Correct? Let me try to save it. Okay, this is saying that it is converting from decimal to integer. I'll just move it to decimal. That's okay. Save. But ideally this would be a whole number, right? So what I can do instead is I can keep it integer for the sake of keeping things properly, and I can simply typecast it. How do you typecast? You take this operation and you simply put the data type here, and this will basically typecast this entire decimal into integer and assign it to this particular variable. Okay, same thing I'll have to do for the else if condition also, but okay, let's do this first and then we'll move on to the next condition. What do I do now? I simply do the iterator for integer I equals 0, I less than new records to create I plus plus, and I'll say the same thing. I can just copy this particular code and I can say location plus I and contact is associated, right? And I'll put it in the locations to create dot add. All right, what about this else if condition? In else if condition, I'll be basically doing the same thing, but I need to delete records. I don't need to insert. So in order to delete them, this will change. What will change? New records to delete. This should be the variable name, right? So records to delete would be my variable. And what would be the subtraction formula here? Basically, this would mean if the old value is greater than the new value, which means this was 5 and this is 3. That means 5 minus 3 should be the correct one, right? So this order is incorrect. In this case, this would be the first attribute, and minus this would be the second attribute, the newer value. So this would basically be 5 minus 3 equals 2, and records to delete, I would basically have to delete 2 records. But now here, when I'm deleting records, this will not work. This iteration will not work, right? Because I am wanting to delete records. So I have to query them and then delete it, right? So we'll figure out a way to do that. Now, how do we do this? We basically have to create a map wherein we store the contact versus their existing locations, right? Can I do this here? I cannot, because I am currently on a loop. Let me get rid of this box down below. I am currently on a loop. I cannot do a query inside. So what I'll do is I'll just go outside and I'll simply query list of locations. I'll call it existing location records. Okay, what do I say? Select ID from location where contact in. Now how do I associate, or rather find out only those specific locations which are part of the contacts that have come in right now? I have this old map, right? So I can say where ID in old map dot key set. See, simple. Save. So what did you do? You fetched all the location records which are part of the contacts that are currently in question. You are not fetching all the contacts in the system, only those which have to be targeted. All right. Do you want to convert this into a map? Let's see. If we'll need a map, we'll convert it. Okay. Now I have come here. I have records to delete, right? Now, which records do I pick? How do I find out? I have to use this particular loop. So I have to create it as a map. Okay, but instead of creating it as a map, what I can do is, let's say I will query id comma contact. Okay, so that I have the contact information with me on the query, and now I'll just go down here and I'll say for location. How do I basically fetch multiple records is my question here. That's what I'm thinking. So basically, if you notice, if this is basically 5 minus 3 equals 2, I need to fetch 2 location records for one contact. This is what I want to fetch, right? So let me do this. I'll iterate over the records to delete. Let's see where we end up with this. I'll say integer I equals 0, I less than records to delete. So I'm iterating it how many times? 2 times. Okay, and what am I doing? I'm basically creating a list, delete list dot add. This name is very vague. I'll just say delete location list. Okay, always ensure you have proper names. Delete location list dot add. What should I add? I would basically want this to be a map now, because I want to fetch the location record. Okay, so I'll say map of id comma location, and I'll say new map id comma location. Let's convert this to a map. Let's say save. There should not be any error here, and if down below I see there is one error because I've not added anything here. So now I have this map, existing location records, right? How do I get the information from this map? This map is of type locations. Will this suffice? It will not, because I want to connect with the contact information. I am in the contact context, right? So how do I figure out which list am I adding here? Let's think it. How do I associate the contact and find only those records which are part of this particular contact? So I could do this. If I put a for loop here, okay, and if I say for each location record in existing location records, okay, I'm iterating over all the records that have come. I say if loc record dot contact is equal to con.id, the current context. Will that help? I can add it here, and I'll add this particular loc record that I want to delete. What do you think? Let's save it once. If it saves up, fine. Yeah, there's some error here, which is delete location list has not been defined, I believe. So I'll just define this list also. So I'll just say let's say save now. Okay, what's the error? LOC record. Why is this error still here? Let's see. It says loop must iterate over collection map. Okay. This is not a list. This is a map. So I have to say dot key set. Or I can say values, because I am iterating over the location object, right? Key set would be of type ID, but I am iterating over location, so I can simply say values and say save. So values are of type location object, ID comma location, right? So now this is saving up fine. But will this work? Let's try to evaluate it. So this should run for 2 times, and this will run for 2 times. Okay, so it will come inside, it will check, okay, for every record that has come as part of this particular transaction, if the contact matches the current contact, yeah, okay, go ahead and add it. It will keep running, and it will add all of them. This will not work. Okay, this will not work. I have to put another check here. Okay, this outer check is not working. See why? This outer loop is iterating twice, but it's not really iterating twice, because you are iterating this for all location records. Okay, and we have not put any check, we have just put the check if contact matches, add it. Now how do you know that this particular addition will stop at 2? You don't, right? So we have to put some check here. Instead of putting this check outside, what I can do is I can just iterate over my location map. I can get rid of one of these braces. Let's align it a bit. Let's say save once. Okay, what do we do here? We basically try to count if delete location list dot size is less than 2, only then add it, or else don't. Will that help? This will help. because now your list will only contain, it should not be 2, it should not be 2, it should basically be this particular variable, because the count is dynamic, right? If the size is less, only then add it, or else don't. Okay, let's quickly test it out and then let's see how it works. So this is fine, I'll just cancel it and I'll go ahead and say contacts. I'll go to Himanshu's record, I'll say details, and I'll modify this from 3 to 5. That should add 2 more records. I'll say save. This saved fine. Let's go to related, and if I take a look at the location, I have 5 records. There were 3 from the previous one, 2 are new. Okay, what if I go back and I modify this particular value to something less? So I'll say 2. Let's say save. So that means 3 records should be deleted. So if I go to the related list, I still see all the records. The records have not been deleted, and that is because we have just added the list. We have not really added the delete command. Okay, so I have to say if delete location list dot is empty, and I'll put a not so that it is not empty, only then delete location list and say save. Alright, so now let's test out the update scenario. Let's see if things are working. So if I go ahead and try to create a contact and I say testing 1, I'm sure this will not be the only testing we do. I'll just put a value here 2 and say save. So this is giving an error. This is an exception, which is a null pointer exception. Good. So this is on line 8 on contact trigger handler. What's the issue? The issue here is this particular map right here on line 8 is basically querying the old map. So you see, old map does not have any values in the insert context, right? And we have put a check here, but we did not put a check on this level, right? So what I can do is I can put a check here also. I'll say if old map is not equal to null, only then go ahead and do this thing, right? Or because this would only happen for the update scenario. And what I'll do as part of this particular requirement is I'll just get this particular definition outside. I'll declare it here. Save. Okay, there is some issue with this. Let's see what's the issue. This is saying variable does not exist, existing. Okay, the equal to is here. It should be saved now. Okay, let's go back and let's try to save it. This should save up with 2 location records created, right? So this is saved. If I take a look at the related list, I see 2 records. But now the important thing is my update scenario should work. So first I'll use the if condition. So I'll put a number more than 2. So I'll say 5. So 3 more records should be created. Let's say save. This saved up fine. Let's take a look at the related list. 5 records have been created, which means our insert code is working fine. And for an update, this particular code is also working fine, right? The only thing pending is this particular section wherein we are deleting records. Let's see how this looks like. I'll go back to the details, and now I'll just say from 5, I'll say 3. That means 2 records should be deleted. Let's say save. So if I take a look at the details, I see there are only 3 records. 2 records have been deleted, which means our update scenario, both the cases are working fine. Nice, fancy. This was a very good use case that we did that kept on getting complex as we went ahead, but we were able to solve it, right? Some good bonus tips or bonus things you can do here is you can put null checks for this particular field. You can actually check for existing data. You can check if there are no records, what do you do? So you can obviously make it a bit more better, but this right here, this code serves the purpose functionally, technically, right? So take a look at this one last time. What we did here was we created a single method and we catered 2 different events. How did we do that? By passing null on the insert scenario, because old map does not exist. We did a mistake and we queried the old map outside the insert and the update check. So we just said if old map is not equal to null, only then query this information, because we'll only need it when old map is not equal to null, which is basically nothing but an update scenario, and we are using it in the update scenario here, right? For the insert, it was very straightforward. We simply created the number of locations we had to create based on the value that was entered. But on the update scenario, things went a bit tricky. The value would change in 2 different ways. It could basically either increase or it could decrease. If it increased, you would be creating more locations. If it decreased, you would be deleting locations. If it increased, that was still a piece of cake. We simply used the same logic we did on the insert scenario, and we created the locations, and we used the same list, and at the end it used the list to insert the locations. But if the value decreased, we wanted to delete records, and that for loop did not work. We had to basically query all the existing records, And then on the existing records, we had to find if the contact that we are currently looking at is the same that we are taking, that is currently in question. And if we checked if the number is less than the number of records that have to be deleted, we compared the list size and we kept on adding until it reached that particular number. And then we said delete that particular location list. Cool. Now there's one problem with this code. I'll tell you what. There's one problem with this code. The problem is this particular check right here is not bulkified. So delete location list dot size can definitely be more than 2. It should be less than 2 per contact. It should be less than 2 per contact. Right now this is not per contact. Why? Because you are comparing it and you're checking if the contact is same. That's fine. If it is true, it comes inside and it adds 2 records. Right? But what if it goes to the for loop iteration the next time for the next record in case of bulkification? It will come back here and it will check, okay, this is another match, and it will see, oh, the records to delete number has changed. It will not be able to add it here. Okay, so what we can do is we can simply set this records to delete as 0 for every contact attribute that comes in, for every context. Or else this will hold a value this will hold the same value for everyone. So it's always necessary to reinitiate the value. So this definition will go from here and this will come here. So this is how you'll handle the bulkification. Now the records to delete will change per contact and then it will basically add accordingly. Alright, just one change we had to do. We did not define it here. Why? Because for the next iteration it would basically hold a value that would be compromised. Okay, cool. That should do. If there are any more loopholes, you can try and update the code, and if you can test it out with bulk import and update scenarios and test it out and try to revamp this code if needed. But yeah, this solves the use case we started with, and I think yeah, that's all about use case 24. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.